Welcome to Murfreesboro Storyteller. Our program today is originating from the Cannonsburg Village in downtown Murfreesboro, which is a replica of early life in Murfreesboro that originated by former Mayor Hollis Westbrooks. We're pleased to have as our guest today Bill Carey, author, reporter, originator of Tennessee History for Kids. Bill, welcome.
Thank you.
I guess we first got acquainted around Old Sparky, the Tennessee electric chair, when I was a freshman in the Tennessee legislature.
I had forgotten about that. You took a tour of Riverbend, and I tagged along as the uninvited freeloader. That's right. I remember that.
But it was a very interesting trip, but especially I've enjoyed getting to know you that way and continuing our friendship over the years.
Yeah.
Bill, when I first knew you then, you were a reporter for the Nashville Tennessean, I believe.
I think that's right. Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. Since then, you've developed Tennessee History for Kids. What led you to do that?
Well, I switched jobs several times in about 4 years because the internet had come along and made major changes to journalism, and I found out I had written a book about Nashville history called Fortunes, Fiddles, and Fried Chicken. A book.
I know of it.
And
yes.
I had been asked to be a judge at a fair, a social studies fair in Nashville,
mm-hmm.
and that process started me down a line of wondering whether it was time to do. Well, I would do a book about Nashville history for kids.
Okay.
And as it turns out, the more I asked around and the more I talked to people, that what people really needed was a resource to help them teach Tennessee history.
Mm-hmm.
So I started Tennessee History for Kids, and it basically consisted of a website, a free website, and it still does, but it consisted entirely of that free website for about 5 years.
Okay.
And that's kind of how I started it.
Okay. What's your background? What's your training? And what's your education?
I was afraid you'd ask that question. I'm completely unqualified to do everything that I do. I went to college and majored in math and Russian.
Math and Russian?
Math and Russian. And I'm a self-taught history nut, and I write well, and I'm very interested in history, but my actual degrees were in math and Russian, but don't ask me to speak Russian, please.
Okay. All right.
Because I need Znayo. Anyway, and
where did you receive your education?
I went to Vanderbilt.
Okay. And originally from where?
I'm originally from Huntsville, but let me talk another part of the story.
Okay.
I went to Vanderbilt on a Navy ROTC scholarship.
Okay.
And then after I got out of Vanderbilt, I flew in the Navy for about 5 years.
What did you fly?
I flew a plane called the P-3, which is a submarine tracking airplane. And at one time, the Navy had 24 P-3 squadrons. It's a little known plane. A lot of people never heard of it.
Yeah.
But we tracked a lot of Soviet submarines, and I'm sorry to say that I've lived long enough that the P-3 is now being decommissioned and replaced with another aircraft. So now I feel like one of those guys whose ship gets decommissioned in the Navy. It's been that long. So that's what I did for about 5 years.
What a wonderful background. How many books have you written altogether?
If you include the ones that weren't published, probably about 8. If you
Okay.
include the ones that technically were, probably about 4. It's kind of weird. A lot of people have written. I've written a couple of books. I wrote an autobiography of a man just for his family, for example. I don't think that counts, but it was actually Monroe Carroll, the head of Central Parking, but that was only for his family. I wrote another, so some of those really don't count, but as far as things that are out there in the bookstores, about 4.
Is Monroe Carroll the father of Lucius Carroll, or
No,
brother?
Monroe Carroll
different family.
is the hospital. Monroe Carroll was the head of Central Parking Corporation.
Oh, yes.
Who became, through his very hard work and diligence, became one of the wealthiest men in Nashville. Gave a huge amount of his money to Vanderbilt Hospital, Children's Hospital is named for him. He gave money for a Catholic high school, now known as Pope John Paul II High School. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, the money can't buy you everything. However, he got cancer, and he died of cancer about 8 or 10 years ago, I guess it was.
I know of him through news stories in the national press. The book on Fortunes, Fiddles, tell me a little bit more about that. I presume about a lot of the wealthy people in Nashville, about the music business. And what was the third part?
Well, the idea of that book was just to do a book on the history of Nashville that focuses on businesses instead of just on politicians and the Civil War generals, which is what most of the books had done before. I wanted to do a book that told the story of like Genesco and National Life and Accident and other parts of it that people don't really remember as much anymore. For example, Kentucky Fried Chicken was based in Nashville for the 6 most successful years it ever had.
Right.
And in fact, it created clones. There were companies that imitated it. There was one known as the Mini Pearl Fried Chicken Company.
John J. Hooker was involved in that one.
When I wrote the book, most of the people who were involved in these companies are still alive, and I'm afraid most of them have died now.
Yeah,
Most
right.
with the Hooker brothers. But for example, there's a lot about how HCA got started. Spent a lot of time with Frist and others, and it worked. The project worked.
Okay, back to Tennessee History for Kids. You have a nonprofit organization, right,
Yes.
that operates this program.
Yes.
I guess we have a lack of history education for our kids as they're growing up today.
Well,
Is that what led to this?
what led to this sort of, every state, there's 50 states, and every one of them has a problem. How do they teach their state histories? Kansas has the problem. California has the problem. Every state wants its students to know a little about their homes, about their home state. And yet we're all moving to this, world in which everyone takes the same standardized test. So this is a unique problem in education. Tennessee has the same problem, and it's probably worse for Tennessee and Virginia and Pennsylvania and these kind of states because our histories are so great. And so, and no offense, but there's a lot more to our history than actually just Arkansas. If you think about how much older this state is and how many chapters of history occurred here. So in Tennessee, what they did is a few years ago, they used to teach a Tennessee history course in like 4th grade and 7th grade. They would teach these courses. And a few years ago, they actually did away with those and decided just to embed the teaching of Tennessee history into the teaching of U.S. history. So when we learn about the Civil War, and we learn about, theoretically, the battles of the Civil War that happened here.
Right.
We learn about the American Revolution. We learn about the fact that people were moving here and that the Native Americans were given arms and gunpowder by the British to try to keep us, being killed over here. And that's kind of been that's part of what Tennessee History for Kids has tried to do for the last 15 years, is help teachers deal with that embedding requirement. But we've had a lot of debate in the last year about whether that's the way we should continue to go or whether we should go back to having a focused course on Tennessee history. And it looks like we are going to go back, but I'm not sure when, to having a focused course, maybe in 4th grade or 5th grade. So that's kind of what I've been involved in.
And that's part of the purpose of what you're doing, I presume.
Well, as the head of a nonprofit that does this, I have not hesitated to speak out, much like there's something called the Holocaust Commission. And the Holocaust Commission is there to help, among other things, to remind us that we need to teach our students about the Holocaust.
Sure.
And the YMCA is there partly to help remind us that we need to teach our kids about civic engagement. So I don't hesitate to speak out about teaching Tennessee in the public schools, much like, speaking of people who live in Murfreesboro, Dr. Carol Van West, the state historian. This is something that's dear to his heart, or other people. And so I have done some speaking out about that, having to remind people all along, yes, I have a bit of a vested interest here because this is what I do,
Sure.
but I think people realize that, I hope so.
Now, I know you have a column monthly, or at least in every issue of the Tennessee Magazine.
I do.
Published by by the Tennessee Electric Cooperative Association. Yes. I get the MTEMC copy.
Yeah. Well, and that story is kind of a funny one. About 12 years ago or 13 years ago, I was visiting somebody and noticed they had this magazine sitting on their counter, and I said, "What is this?" And they said, "It's Tennessee Magazine," and I thought maybe they could do a story about my little nonprofit, which I had just started. And they did a nice story about my nonprofit in our website. And about a month later, I suggested to them that I give them a bunch of Tennessee history tidbits that they can put throughout their magazine that would fill space, because I know how hard it is to fill a magazine.
Sure.
And they said, "Sure, that'd be great." That's what we agreed on, is tidbits.
Okay.
About 2 weeks later, they called and said, "Where's your column?" And I said, "My what?" And they said, "Your column." I said, "What column?" And they said, "Well, you agreed to do a column." And I said, "I didn't agree to do a column." And they said, "Well, we've got a whole page for you here." So I wrote a column, and I wrote another column, and I've been doing that column for 11 years.
Okay.
And I don't think I've ever told them how funny it was, but now the column is often 3 pages or 4 pages, but I never really intended to do it. And the problem is, once you've done it, I'm in my 130th or something, I run out of material. It's hard to come up with something you haven't already done before.
Well, I guess that's true.
Yeah.
Now, you've worked in other counties of the state, helping them to restore their history or restore the teaching of their history,
well,
or the knowledge of it?
I travel all over the state. Here's the thing, and I need people to understand this. I don't know more about Tennessee history than anyone else. Dr. Carol Van West probably does. But
Absolutely.
I do know enough, and I speak a lot. A lot of people think I do, but I really only, I know a little about a lot.
Okay.
as opposed to a lot about a little. Like I know about 4 really interesting things about every county.
Okay.
Like in this case of this county.
Tell me 4 from Rutherford.
Well,
Whatever
I would
comes to
argue that
mind.
the most important thing that's ever happened to Rutherford County in terms of why the place looks the way it does now was the coming of the Nissan plant. And no doubt about it. Think about how many people live here now and how that changed everything. Second, probably most important thing would be the coming through of Interstate 24.
Okay.
And Battle of Stones River was hugely important, but not necessarily to the development of Murfreesboro.
True.
But the other thing I discovered recently that I didn't know, you never stop learning, is I have an old map of early Tennessee from like 1830. And at that time, to get from Lebanon to Nashville, you had to go south to Jefferson and then go up to Nashville. And I guess it's because Stones River was too wide to cross.
Could very well be.
And at that time, Jefferson was the county seat.
That's right.
Not for long.
Yes.
But, and you know more about Jefferson than I do. That's just something I just recently discovered, so.
Well, on my mother's side, her family was from the old Jefferson community.
Yeah.
And I had an aunt and uncle that still lived there on a farm, and I would visit them every summer, help them go get the cows, try to milk and swim in the river. And old Jefferson was quite a place for the city of Nashville, a recreational area at what was called Jefferson Springs on Stones River.
And is that farm flooded now?
I would say most of it is,
Okay.
where that was.
Yeah.
A lot of it is.
And how did I discover this? Like I told you, I'm running out of material here. I decided to do a column on counties that have moved their county seats over the years. And I thought there'd be about 5. There's about 17.
Is that a fact?
Yeah, for example,
Okay.
during the Civil War, Chattanooga was the second most fought over city in the country, besides Richmond. And yet Chattanooga was not the county seat. Dallas was the county seat of Hamilton County at that time.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, Dallas is now underwater just like Jefferson. But Dallas was because it's more centrally located. Also, during the Civil War, Memphis was not the county seat of Shelby County. It was Raleigh, a town smack in the middle of the county.
I know of Raleigh, yes.
So there's those 2, but then there's places, Morgan County was not, a place called Monroe was the county seat of Morgan County. A place called Troy was the county seat of Obion County. A place called Washington was the county seat of Ray County. And so every one of these places has a reason. A lot of times it was the railroad. The railroad came through and missed it. A lot of times I have no idea why they moved it, and we may never know, but it turns out to be, just like many things I research, I thought, okay, there's about 4, I'll have a page. No, there's like 17, and it's now 4 pages.
4 pages,
And now I need more space. So
I guess Jefferson was the county seat because of the river, wasn't it? Or not?
I'm guessing it was Jefferson predates Murfreesboro. I'm guessing that Jefferson may predate Murfreesboro.
I think that may be true. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it may have been obvious in everyone's mind that eventually we're going to have to move the county seat, but Jefferson might have made more sense. In the early days, southeast of here was Indian Territory.
Okay.
There was a time period where the boundary of Indian Territory was the south of this county, and that you might not feel safe if you were closer to the center. You might have wanted to be on the Murfreesboro side. That people have being attacked because we had taken away the Cherokee land, and they weren't quite on agreement on that yet. There was a place known as, that has completely vanished from the map now, called Fort Nash. And it's just south of here, near where Bedford meets Coffee meets Rutherford County.
Okay.
And that was the edge of Cherokee territory and white territory for about 5 years. It's on top of a hill, and I don't know if we know exactly where it was. And that's, maybe somebody watching this show will know where it was. but I've read Tennessee Historic Quarterly articles about where Fort Nash was. No one's really sure, but it is on maps. Fort Nash and Fort Blunt was the other one. That's over in
East Tennessee.
That's over in Jackson County near Gainesboro.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Those were the 2 borders of this at that time.
Okay. Are there other publications where you have a column appearing regularly other than Tennessee Magazine?
No, the Tennessee History for Kids website is full of stuff that I have, and everything on that website is stuff is written by me, I guess. So so that's kind of the main thing, but the column does keep me going. And just when I think, Robin Conover is the editor. She is the most laid-back person I've ever worked for. I love Robin to death. She's been known to call me and say, "I need your column," and I'll say, "When?" She goes, "About an hour ago." And I realize, I say, when do you send it to press? And she says, in about 4 hours or something. I'm like, well, I better get it now.
That's pretty short notice.
Yeah, she's much, I don't know if the column would have survived this long if I'd worked for somebody that's better organized.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Oh, good. What else you have on the rise? Anything different you're planning to do about Tennessee history for kids?
Well, we do a thing every summer. For many years, we told teachers, well, we try to go to as many in-services teacher training events as we can. We go to the ones they do, the system organizes. We do the one that the Tennessee Council for Social Studies organizes.
Okay.
Library, by the way, a lot of those are here in Murfreesboro,
yeah, right.
because of the central location and because of the hotel right there off of exit 76.
Embassy Suites.
Embassy Suites. Right. Most of them are there, to be quite honest. We do all those conferences. Along the way, we decided, I kept saying that if we could ever afford to do it, we would have our own events. So we started doing our own in-service 2 years ago. We call it the Tennessee History Tent Revival. And we bring in people, we bring in reenactors, college professors, history buffs. And this year's is in Franklin, and our keynote person is Bobby Kane, who was the first African American to graduate from an integrated high school in the South. He graduated from Clinton High School in 1957. Anybody who's ever studied the Civil Rights Movement learns about Bobby Kane, but most people don't know that he's lived a quiet life in Nashville. He's retired. He doesn't look his age. He looks, as you understand what that's like, you don't look your age either. But this man, I would have guessed that he's about 20 years younger than he is. But he'll be our keynote, and we will have about 250 teachers that day.
I was wondering who would be the attendees.
Yeah, the Tennessee History for Kids heavily underwrites the thing. We only charge the teachers about $40, which a normal conference would charge $150. And so we subsidize the whole thing. And we also have reenactors. We'll have a couple of professors. We have Derek Frisbee from MTSU will be there.
Derek,
and we just want to bring as many interesting. We don't want it to turn into something boring, but I sometimes describe it as maybe the Southern Festival books, but just for teachers.
Okay.
And we've done this 3 years, and we did it last year twice. We'll do it next year. We're moving it to Knoxville. We're going to try to move it around a little bit.
East, west, and middle.
Yeah, because we do have people come from all over the state, but it's hard to get people from the Tri-Cities to come all the way here.
That's a long drive.
Yes. It's one thing come from Knoxville. So we do that. We're very closely watching the standards review process. The social studies standards are changing, and the new one's going to effect in a couple of years, but based on what they do, we do little booklets. We learned a long time ago that if you just have a website, teachers actually prefer something in writing, and students still prefer something in writing.
Oh, yeah.
And so we have little booklets.
And students do too, you say?
Oh, yeah.
That's interesting.
Oh, yeah. And they may not realize it, but you're going to learn better with something that's in writing. You're going to learn better if you write it down.
I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah, but also they need something tangible.
Yes.
And so we started doing little booklets, and we have to charge for them, or we'll go broke. We charge $2 a booklet.
Okay.
And whenever we redo the social studies standards, all the booklets we have will be thrown into the Cumberland River. Actually, they'll be recycled, and we will have to redo them all.
Okay.
And some of those booklets are for kids as low as kindergarten.
What is your budget? What are your funds? Where do your funds come from?
We get a grant from the Tennessee Department of Education, a small grant. About 4/5 of our money. It's a good grant. And then about 3/4 of our money comes from the sale of our own booklets.
Okay.
They've kind of become our Girl Scout cookies.
Okay.
And
Very good.
and then we have a few for-profit. We have a few private sponsors such as Nissan, and Bridgestone. And you'll see them on our booklets. You'll see a little page for them, and that's basically it. We do get a small grant every year, most years, from the Tennessee Historical Commission, which we do posters.
Okay.
We do free posters. Those aren't charged. We don't charge for those.
Those go to the schools, or?
Well, any teacher. Like last year, we produced 20,000 posters on the Civil Rights Movement in Tennessee. And the hard part is distributing. It's easy and cheap to print them.
Sure.
But to distribute them, you can lose your shirt. And so what we did last time is we gave a certain amount to school systems, like if the elementary school coordinator in Jefferson County promises to distribute them to teachers, we'll send her a box.
Okay.
But we really can't send one to this teacher, one to that teacher.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot of state lawmakers who love to send out free things. And,
I know that.
Yeah, and so but that's kind of the trick. It can take 3 months to distribute posters, but our goal is to make sure that they're on the walls of classrooms.
Okay.
We don't want them as much on walls of kids. We want lots of eyes to see them. So,
Okay. You have a board of directors, I know, and there are several legislators and former legislators on there, one of whom is Representative Steve McDaniel,
Yes.
who is a Civil War reenactor. You mentioned a reenactor.
Yes.
Is he involved in that role with your board or with your organization?
No, but it's interesting. We started, originally my contact at the legislature, my main board member from the legislature, was a Democrat in the House.
Okay.
And it's a friend of mine, Rob Briley.
Oh,
And
yeah.
Rob was on my board, and
I served with Rob.
Rob helped us get going, and then there were a few big changes in Tennessee,
Yes, I
and it looked
noticed.
like we might lose what support we had from the government here. And then, interestingly enough, I ran into Ron Ramsey one day. Lieutenant Governor Ramsey, he goes, "How's that Tennessee history thing going?" And this is after a lot of things that happened,
Sure.
and that we had kind of lost our grant for funding for budgetary reasons. And I said, "Well, you know, we're having a hard time." And he says, I remember what he said. He said, "Whoa, whoa, 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 no." And so he said, and he did not want to see that. He had become a big fan of the organization.
Wonderful.
Teachers had emailed him and thanked him, and he said, "Well, look, we want to cut the budget. We don't want to cut this." So he came on our board, and by that time we'd already gotten Steve McDaniel. So we ended up, and we still have also Representative Karen Camper, who's a Democrat.
Yes.
We have Mark Maddox, who was in the House.
Served with Mark from
Yeah.
Dresden.
Yeah. So we try to have some of those. We also have people from some of our sponsors. We have Tracy Woodard from Nissan. We have Dennis Wagner from AT&T. So we have Ed Fishbow from HCA.
Okay.
But it's hard. I will tell you, there's some important people, and I'm thrilled to have them. I'm honored to have them. It's hard to get them together.
I can imagine.
Yeah, it's hard to get a quorum around
They're
here.
busy people. Huh?
Yeah, but yeah. But we pull that off about twice a year, and I think the best part of what you say, what do we do? The truth of the matter is, if something comes along, we think, let's try it.
Okay.
You know, and so we're not a textbook company. We're not part of McGraw-Hill. We're also not tied to a specific museum or anything. Our main purpose is to help teachers teach Tennessee history. If we have this crazy idea like the tent revival, we'll try it. If it doesn't work, then we won't do that again. Next year we're moving the tent revival to Knoxville. That may be a train wreck. I don't know.
Yeah, hard to know. Do you do it?
And if it is, we won't do it again. But for all we know, we may have 400 teachers who want to come.
Well,
and then,
I hope you do.
and then maybe we'll move it to Memphis. So we do try new things, and that's kind of what we do. And it's nice not to have too many bureaucratic requirements on us.
Sure. Okay.
So,
You have any other books in the making?
no, but one thing I will mention on the
please.
the website, probably the best way for people to see what we do is to go to our website. It's www.tnhistoryforkids.org.
Okay.
It's hugely trafficked. It's one of the most widely used Tennessee history sites in the state. It may be the number one. The reason I know that is if you Google the words Tennessee history, I think we come up number one or
Oh,
something.
do you really?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, sure.
And it's got stuff on there about, there's a section, if you go to history, a little tidbit about every county. There's 95 counties, and we have 2 or 3 interesting stories about each county, like in the Nissan or Jefferson in the case of Murfreesboro,
Okay.
or Rutherford County. But it tells you all this information, and I've had a lot of people, I've had elected officials, for example, tell me that they use my website because when they travel around their district, they want to always have a tidbit when they speak to the Rotary
okay.
Club, and one way to get these tidbits is to go to my website, and so they'll show up in Ooltewah, for example,
Okay.
and know that Ooltewah used to be the county seat of a county that doesn't exist anymore,
What was the county name?
James County. It was Tennessee's bankrupt county that ceased to exist.
Which is now part of Hamilton County.
It's now
right?
part of Hamilton,
Yeah,
and
okay.
but there's stuff on here. People say, "I didn't know that." Well, unless you happen to live there,
Sure.
how would you know? So there's a lot of stuff like that on there.
Other unknown, little known facts about some other counties in the state that come to mind.
Well, that's kind of an open-ended question.
That is.
Okay, but for example, Sewanee. This is just, I don't know why this just struck me. When you go to Sewanee now, it's this beautiful college campus. What a beautiful place it is. You think, how did this come about? It turns out that University of South is there
Right.
because the railroad was coming through from here to Chattanooga. They built a branch line of the railroad straight up the hill to mine coal. They tried mining it at a place now known as Sewanee. It didn't work out. The
Okay.
coal isn't as rich there as they hoped it would.
Okay.
As it turns out, there's much better coal down the line a little bit in places now known as Tracy City And so they extended the line to Tracy City and did some serious coal mining at Tracy City, made a lot of money.
Okay.
Meanwhile, they had this plot of land that they had bought and they didn't know what to do with it. They were able to convince the church to buy it and build a university. So the reason the University South is there is because they couldn't mine coal, because the coal wasn't very rich there compared to just 10 miles away. That's why Sewanee is there. And that same company, whose name slips my mind right now, the Tennessee Iron and Coal Company,
Okay.
eventually discovered a much better place to mine. It's now known as Birmingham. And so that company, which the company that basically started Birmingham, originally tried to do its enterprise in what is now like Grundy County.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but that's, if you look at a history of the Tennessee Iron and Coal Company, the first couple of chapters are about trying to mine in the mountains of Tennessee. So there's stuff like that everywhere.
That's interesting. Bill, do you read a lot as well as write a lot?
I not as much as I would, and just like anybody else
Sure.
who does what I do, I wish I could pick up and read just random things like I used to, fiction, or, you know, I told you I majored in Russian.
Yeah, right.
I wish I could pick up and just sit down and read Dostoevsky like I used to, but the truth of the matter is 90% of what I read is related to local and state history. Okay. So yes, I do read a lot, and I buy just about every history. If I'm at a used bookstore and they've got some old book on Tennessee history that I've never seen, I immediately buy it. And so but yes, I'm afraid so.
Well, obviously you're a rich source of Tennessee history. It's just amazing, the facts that you know and have found over the years.
Well, I'm a source of something, and some people think, but I'll tell you one other thing.
Okay.
Are we running out of time? And
About time for one more thing.
the Shelbyville,
Okay.
Bedford County, the courthouse that is in Shelbyville now was built in the Great Depression.
Okay.
What happened to the previous courthouse? It was burned down by a lynch mob. True story. And this is not a trivial, this is not something that no one noticed at the time. It was on the front page of the Chicago Tribune and the New York Times. A lynch mob burned down the courthouse in Bedford County, and I think it was 1932. And it has to do with the man who was accused of rape, who was not lynched. They got him what happened was they were afraid of the lynch mob. They got him in a car and took him to Nashville, where he was later tried. But the lynch mob was so upset that they actually burned the courthouse down.
So he was not there when they burned the courthouse down. Okay.
Very few people in Bedford County know this story. And one person knows it very well who's got roots in Bedford County is Jim Cooper, the congressman.
Oh, I bet, yes.
Because his father was the
Prentice
defense
Cooper.
attorney
for
this young man.
Is that right?
And this is how Prentice Cooper became famous originally, was in defending this young man who they tried to lynch. Prentice Cooper, and that's Jim Cooper's father. And you might say, well, people know that story. Well, in this case, this is one that even a lot of people in Bedford County don't know about it. And it's still obviously somewhat controversial. I don't think there's a plaque that tells you the story about the mob, actually, to this day. So,
Bill, you're amazing. It's just been a
you.
joy to visit with you to talk about Tennessee history.
Well, thank you.
And it's wonderful that you're making Tennessee history available more to kids and get them more involved in what has happened in their communities.
Well, thank you very much, and it's an honor to be on your show. I remember you when you were in the State House, and you served honorably and wonderfully, and I kind of wish we still had you up there.
This has been Murfreesboro Storyteller, and our guest has been Bill Carey, originator of the Tennessee History for Kids program throughout Tennessee. Thank you for joining us.